And I'll periodically go pay attention to that. Give it 1 second. All right, all right. We have Dale here. That's awesome. We got Sean. Sasha, you're new. Haven't seen you before. Nice. Welcome. Right on. We got Peter in his new place. Awesome. Keith, probably going to have some questions. All right. So let me kill the volume here on this other one. Yeah, they really don't make it elegant, do they? You know, when you want to live stream a chat, it just live streams it over there and just has the volume on high and just not smooth at all. So, anyways, guys, thank you everyone for coming. I'm monitoring the chat as usual. So, anyone has anything to say in there, I will see it. But there are a lot of people here. Oh my gosh, there's my little Poppy. Hi, baby. Hi, my baby. This is what Daddy does on Sunday mornings. We got Damone. Awesome. We got some new faces. This is really, really cool. I'm super glad since I've been home from tour. We really, really have a lot of people that I haven't seen before in our sessions. So somehow our Patreon seems to have grown while we were gone doing nothing. And I really appreciate that. So we got Fu here today. We've got Amir here. Fu is up in Canada in his beautiful studio. Amir's in his studio in Long Beach. And we have, at least to my right, we have Tom Dolan, who many of you have heard his name bandied about in the Julien-K lore and our constant, work over what now has become, well over a decade of being Julien-K. And I talked to Tom earlier. We had a little pregame. We have a ton of history, so it's really, really hard to figure out where we should start, what we should talk about, all that kind of good stuff. But I thought it might be I thought it might lead to the most maybe interesting questions and maybe make what Tom does in our relationship more real if I use something more recent and more kind of groundbreaking that we did that was largely driven by Tom's design. Um, Everyone knows that everyone that's part of these Patreons and a lot of people that are watching on YouTube right now know that we are one of the top crowdfunding bands in the world. We have an incredible fan base that really supports us. And even though it took us a long time to figure out how to do it and what voice to use, like how to bring it to the people that support the band, do we make like a silly, funny commercial? Do we make like do we do something clever? You guys all saw what we ended up doing. We made this enigmatic commercial where we didn't even necessarily describe what we were doing. And we just made something we thought was really cool. And we didn't do anything traditional. It ended up being completely weird. And the thing that made it really work, the voice that actually spoke and made it real for people to buy it into was Tom's art direction. And I think that when you're looking at a campaign and you have to populate this side column with images and products that really make sense, that really speak to our fans and really represent the music. And before there's really any full, songs to listen to, all you hear are a couple clips, then it 100% falls on a guy like in our lives, it's Tom. It's been Tom for 15 years. It completely falls on his back. And we have to have this like literal, you know, it depends on how many members are in Julien-K, but literally like a fifth member of the band level of relationship. And Tom has always been able to use the imagery of the band to say things that we don't know how to say, to basically speak for the music. And the cool thing is Tom is a really accomplished musician himself, and just has a huge resume in the art world and in the design world. We're honestly lucky to even be working with him. But images like this shirt, this amazing stuff, and all the shirts that we're wearing right now, and many of the shirts that you guys own that we've had on tour, it's all Tom's voice and us speaking together. So we just thought it would be great to have a chat about sort of how we think about all this stuff, how we do what we do, and try to dig in a little bit into Tom's mind, because there's so much in there. So thank you guys all for joining us. And Tom, thank you so much for being here. I hope that intro made some sense.
It made complete sense. And, you making me think of new things all the time. as you guys know, we kind of met at a good time. I had left working at a record company, and you're just making me think the truth. All of us as music fans, we know throughout our lives as kids or whatever, there were some bands that we thought were great, and their visuals were kind of limp, and then there were some bands that were great and their visuals were great, and even as a teenager or junior high, you could feel like, there's a kind of cool factor to this band that isn't just a great set of musicians, but they've got a aesthetic and they've got this project, and it seems like there's some conceptual depth to it when the visuals are taking it to another level. So that was my job at the record label for a long time. But the thing is, like, some artists get that and are into it, and some artists aren't. Some artists have their own idea, which is often bad, about how they should be imaged. But the fifth band member thing, what's true about that is you guys have trusted me since the beginning. And the way, like, you don't tell Amir what guitar lead to play, and he doesn't tell you how to do something. You guys haven't told me how to do it. You've just wanted me to do it and trusted that I got a handle on what will feel right for you guys. And the cool thing about Julien-K is even the artists that I've worked with that have got it, and I think allowed me to do great work, the length of this relationship and your guys' desire, like you do in your music, to always keep adding a new thing. This has been a fun project where literally the logo and the brand has continued to evolve and change and have a new piece kind of stuck onto it, or have something. And yet, as a designer, that's a really fun project. How do you keep evolving something while maintaining a personality? And so for me, it's always just been a super fun problem to keep trying to solve for you guys.
Yeah, we collaborate so well together. That's where I think the fifth member thing kind of comes into play too. It's because we so feed off of each other. We might have some sort of an idea, like we might have an idea of a direction or something. Sometimes, a lot of times, no. Like the time capsule thing, you really just nailed that one. That was just like, when you came in with those ideas,
I feel like Tom made me get it.
Yeah.
Because time capsule is such a weird concept, right? We were doing what? We're gonna create a 4-disc set of
And
fucking 100 songs. What are we doing?
And he created like this new logo, the Frankenstein logo, which is such a genius idea. There were just so many different things, but even from the very beginning, when we did Death to Analog, how we incorporated that photographer that I had seen at this show, right? Remember how that whole thing came together? But we've always just worked so well. It's like you do things, maybe it's not all the way there, but you are so close, and then it's just a little poke, and then you take it across the finish line.
Well, maybe the playing music part is key, right? Like, so again, you guys know as musicians, you can't really overcook things, because you start sucking the life out of them at that point. So it's like, how do you just kind of let things happen, and when it feels good, just, okay, that feels good. And so we've always been able to work quickly and trust each other, and that keeps it fun, right? Because nobody wants to, all of us have worked on projects where you're on the 50th version of something and you just want it to get out the door because you hate it now, and that's where crappy work comes from. So
I know we're kind of jumping ahead, but it's interesting to look at this logo, because the center of the logo is based out of the original logo we created together, and we're going to actually show everyone some of these really early incarnations of the Julien-K logo that Tom and his team, I think it was your team, or maybe it was just you, I don't know, prepared initially, that led us to that first Julien-K logo. But this one's so cool how you use part of that as showing this retrospective, this history.
And this is for time capsule, by the way.
Yeah,
and this is what we call Frankenstein logo.
Yeah, you called this the Frankenstein logo. And so basically there's like a new element in the front. I don't think that was anything that we had ever used before. Or maybe
I actually think that's from the very, very, very beginning.
You
I
know,
don't
The
know.
old,
I don't, that's from like the, uh, maybe the California Noir
Oh,
double.
okay. So that's
ah,
kind of more California noir. Then there's some Death to Analog, and the K is definitely California noir.
You know,
But yeah, so I don't know how you did that, all that, but it's really interesting, how your brain worked to put that together. Like that's something really unexpected. And then of course the packaging, that's an outtake picture, by the way. So that was an outtake picture from Death to Analog, the cover of Death to Analog before the paint was splattered. And it was really cool how you took that and used that, a portion of this picture, as part of the cover, that you then layered all these other things on top of to create that amazing time capsule cover that you did.
the black makeup sessions where everybody actually did get full black makeup. That's not photo effect.
Yep. We had to actually be covered from the waist up for all of those pictures. And Shasha just showed her time capsule, the
oh
final
wow,
one. He's got it
yeah,
on the screen
yeah.
there.
That's so cool. Yeah, I mean, even the way Time Capsule is written and everything, it has this. It still looks futuristic and technical, but also has this almost. There's almost a Lord of the Rings like runes feel to it. You know what I mean? In terms of like, you're getting some package of material from eons ago. You know what I mean? It's just such a cool design. Did we just lose Amir? Looks like we may have.
Well,
Um,
you also are making me think about, whenever I've tried to do stuff for myself, I'm getting better, I think, at it, but it's hard. It's always hard to do things for yourself. So, you know, uh, uh, I'm able to come at you, Julien-K, almost like I am part of the band, but it's not me, it's you. So it's easier. And, and yeah, Time Capsule is just fun because there's so much stuff there, history, the different members, all these different people that I got to, that I've met, that, some of them come, some of them go, some of them are, you've had but super interesting relationships with all those people. And they're all part of what makes Julien-K over the years.
I wanted to comment sort of what you were saying about the relationship and or just the bands that had a fifth member, that we loved. Going back to like 4AD in the 80s, it was like such an influence,
Right.
Because that label had a look, and then Network kind of built off of that as a label that I did a lot of work with in Vancouver, Skinny Puppy and Sarah McLachlan and all that. They kind of did the same kind of thing. Like they had, you could walk into a record store and see a new 4AD or a new Network record, and you can kind of tell from a distance that it's on that label.
Yeah.
So it's similar bringing that into a band, and having a band art director.
And it's not always easy. Factory was really the first label that did that for me, Joy Division's record label. And that literally took the guy who ran the label telling the bands, no, this guy, Peter Saville, is designing your jacket and you'll like it, and it didn't always go over well with the bands, but it created an incredible personality for the label. And like you say, people were then buying the records without knowing the new bands just because it was a factory record. So that ends up being a key component.
I think that's definitely something that when we started Julien-K, after doing Orgy and having that iconic, Orgy O in the kind of the blurry digital O that we'll talk about Steve Gertis in a moment, which is kind of a precursor to how we met you and all sorts of stuff. I definitely thought that in that time we were zeroing in on that kind of like Anton Corbin, Depeche Mode type of relationship. We wanted that for Orgy. We wanted that for, any of the music that we do. Dead by Sunrise, moving on. We worked with Tom on Dead by Sunrise as well, and Chester was super, behind all that as well. Loved what we did with Julien-K, so we carried that kind of relationship over, and it worked out awesome. But Kevin brought up in the chat here that it is sort of like a relationship, an Anton Corbin Depeche Mode relationship, and I think it's definitely what I wanted. And I think in Orgy, because Orgy was such a chaotic band, we did kind of lose we kind of lost that direction because you had, Jay trying to come in and do more and more kind of crazy stuff that wasn't in the family of the direction of what we were trying to do until finally even the music went off the rails. And in Julien-K, I think that we came into this, we had way more control, obviously. And I think Amir and I were really adamant that no, we want to like have an art direction that makes sense from the beginning all the way up through. We want elements that make sense through this. And it was important to me that we could work with one person. We just didn't think it was possible. We didn't think that we would end up having like a 15-year relationship with somebody. Um, but yeah, I mean, David's bringing up Punk Static Paranoia from Orgy. Yeah, I mean, we had nothing to do with that. I mean, that's talk about going off the rails. And you're dealing with a band like Orgy that had incredible art design and direction in the beginning, from the band level, from the everyone was on the same page in the beginning, and then just seeing it go so haywire. When you're known for that, you're known for your look, and you're known for the sound and the look all saying the same thing. And I think that going into Julien-K, we really, really wanted exactly what you and Fu are describing, that factory records type of feel, that when you go to a record store, you see our album there and you're like, oh, that's Julien-K. Oh, that's the new Julien-K. You don't even know what the album cover looks like yet, but it's us. And I think through that, working with you, we've achieved that now over what is, an actual discography. We have something that when I put them all next to each other, except for the one album that Nathan worked on, which we've even kind of been able to tie back into kind of the direction. I think it all looks like something, it all really has a uniform feel that evolves. And I think that really allows the music to have a space, it creates a playground for the music to live in, visually, mentally. I think that's super important.
For me, it made me like bands better, when I was,
Yes.
the people on the call can probably tell you where that did it for them. But I think for you guys, I've worked with companies, Apple Computer and stuff like that. The companies that are good are smart, realizing like we sort of need a compass that we can just sort of to feel, is this the right direction or the wrong direction? And the tighter you define stuff, the more it helps inform all decision making, right? You're like, no, this feels right for us, or this feels wrong for us. We shouldn't do this. We should. And so I think that it's interesting how the ecosystem of design personality helps inform you guys. But it also gives me clues. I know what will feel right as a visual, because I listen to the music and be like, oh, there's this combination of roughness and polish going on. There's distortion and there's detail. How do I try to I can hear that in the music, so how do I capture that visually?
Awesome. We have a hand raised. Mr. Keith, I'm unmuting you.
Hello.
Hey.
Very nice to meet you. Cool.
How you doing?
Hey, you kind of just almost answered my question, but I want to take it one step further. I know it's not the same story with Julien-K or Orgy or whatever, but when a band comes to you and they really kind of don't know who they are from a style and design perspective, but they have good songs, what is it that you're taking from them to kind of develop that for them?
God, that's a good question.
It's I'm a music fan too, and have been since I was a little kid. So I'm usually trying to talk to them about the music first, and what I hear in the music that is interesting, what people are going to respond to, and so then the discussion becomes, well, how do we capture that in a visual, whether it needs to be spectacular or it needs to be honest and pared down, or it needs to be chaotic, or it needs to be, so it's like, what is in there in the music, and how do we capture that in the visuals? Because then it feels like it works and it's honest, and you're not like painting a false front on it. So Did that answer that question?
Yeah. But one other question too: how close do you need to be with the members to know, like, if an idea that you're coming up with or whatever might have you ever had something that might perhaps maybe the band couldn't pull over on on their fans or whatever? You know what I mean? It's like, could
You
they
know,
live up to it? You know what I'm saying?
oh, well, that's, that's not my problem. That's their
Yeah.
problem. Uh, it's more, you know, entertainment is, because it's financially risky. I think, few things are blockbusters. Everybody thinks it's kind of a wild industry, but it's actually very conservative in a lot of ways, and people are afraid to do new things. So the challenge is usually with the bands, or with the band's managers, or people that are of course want to see a financial return for what they're doing. They've invested a ton of energy and resources into trying to put something out. Convincing them, like, no, this is going to be cool because it's totally different, is can be hard sometimes. And but managers, sometimes are good business people, but kind of don't have a cool bone in their body about whether what works or not.
And label people and
Right.
A&R people, sometimes they do, I mean, we were pretty lucky at Warner Brothers, that we had
At that time, yes.
that we had Steve there, because honestly, when we were doing the orgy stuff, we were just kind of hyper focused on making the music, and obviously, like, there was a lot of focus on what we looked like, but I don't think anybody had thought about, like, oh shit, we need like a logo. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, we really didn't have anything really.
No.
So
It's only been pretty recently that people have understood that a logo, a brand, a thing that now, of course, you can sell when people can just get access to the music without paying for it. Smart bands had figured that out 30 years ago, but a lot of bands had not. And we're not doing this just to create sellable things. We're doing this to create a tight, cool personality that helps people understand, what Julien-K is about. But those two things kind of click together.
Definitely.
And yeah, sometimes artists are super trusting and they just let you go, and that doesn't happen often enough. It's more like artists think, well, everybody told me what I was doing was wrong, and here I am successful, so why should I listen to it? That kind of is more common sometimes, and that can be tough.
Keith, one thing that we've done for sure, I mean, we've been very lucky to know Tom, but we were, introduced to Tom by a lot of our friends. Honestly, it was kind of like a perfect convergence of friends that we trust and like Steve Pross, the Z-Barth brothers, who were Virgin Tears at the time. A lot at Steve Gertis, which is Tom's bandmate and fellow art director, worked for Warner Brothers, who did the initial Orgy stuff and the Orgy O, very famous, like, mark now. And once we realized that something was happening between us, like that Tom really was at another level and he made us better. We all really, not only did we become friends, but we kind of invest in that relationship in terms of sharing a little bit more of where we want to go and putting that time in, and developing the friendship, but also developing the flow of information, because we kind of realized that, just like a great musician, if he has the data and the more he understands about the brand, the more powerful the imagery is, and the more he can say with something simple, which is also something that was important to us. Tom hit on something really interesting in terms of the visuals telling this, helping to define this personality, and also the play between that and products and things you can sell in a modern age. Merch saves our ass. I mean, I'll tell you guys right now, the merch sales that we do at shows makes touring worth it, because the guarantees sure don't. But the merch and the pieces that are cool and fun to, like, tattoo on you, and I've seen many of these marks tattooed on people and so on and so forth. It's almost like the exhaust that comes off of a great personality and a great package that makes sense musically and visually. You know what I mean? You
Hmm.
almost want to like our gear and stuff we wear on stage. You almost want to put these insignias on, like we're a military operation and stuff like that. So it really goes into the whole gamification of the brand and all the things that I personally find fun. I know that when I work with Tom, I'm going to get little pieces, little shapes and elements that I can repurpose and use in different ways, and that often becomes products. And not just for the financial motive, but because it's fun, because I enjoy it, because it's something I want.
In
Um,
in in that vein, I'm really impressed going through these old, prototypes and everything, like the volume of work that goes into it before a logo or something
yeah,
pops out. I
One
could
of the
yeah.
show.
Do you
things
Oh,
want?
one of the
You
things
want
I
to
wanted
walk us through some of those initial guys? You guys want to see
yeah.
the evolution of our first logo? Fu was kind of rapid firing some stuff before, but this might be kind of fun to kind of see where this came from and actually get on that page. Keith, that was awesome questions. Thank you. Look at that. Isn't that wild? That's one of the first logos, guys, one of the first iterations. We have a lot, and I don't think that we have all of them.
No.
But
and
these
then
kind of
and then like this,
visualizations,
yeah, like showing it on the street, like that's so cool. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
um,
Tom would always prepare these boards and different things for us so that we could see mock-ups of t-shirts and mock-ups of like billboards and things so that you could get a feel for what these logos look like in the real world, which is so helpful.
We had never worked with anyone who could do that before. It was so new to us. We'll have to have it on the next session. And Fu, don't go too much faster because I want to tell this story real quick. But just like that, those posted bills that Tom kind of mocked up so we could see what it looked like. Tom created when we got our actual logos, our the real logo that we decided on. Tom created an entire brand deck that I have. I have the physical book, but I have to go get it in storage. He created a whole brand deck of it in storefronts and everything, and it made us understand the usage of the mark. It made us understand how to make posters and how we could use it to kind of as a propaganda tool, which we all love. We think that's super fun and super cool. But, we had never experienced anything like that before, Tom. We just never seen
One of
anything.
the other things I wanted to say is that I, rely on Tom, and I have for many years, in the fact that, we always like to play him the music a lot of times before anybody else ever gets to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback that he gives us and the things that he says about the music sometimes are like creatively, he just has a really great way of explaining it, what he's hearing and the feeling he's getting from what he's hearing. And I know, we always do that because it helps his cogs start turning as far as what that's going to look like. Um, and I mean, we've never worked with anybody else like that ever. And that has always been a very important thing for me. I always love when Tom hears some of our music for the first time to hear his feedback of like what he's getting out of it.
His feedback often can change album titles or not, excuse me, album titles. It can change song titles and lyrics for me because he'll have an insight into the way it feels that I didn't think of or I couldn't put into words. So it's very powerful.
Well, Amir, as a producer working with bands and trying to get a sound, that the words that coming up, like I've been in the recording studio and having a producer saying, I want that snare to sound more sandy or something, and like or this the guitar is too snaky or something, like sometimes it does take coming up with the right word and people are like, oh, okay, yeah, it's got to be more this or that, and so you, I'm sure, do that as a producer all the time, telling people, oh, this needs to sound a certain way and what's the right word that captures the sound that you're looking for. It's kind of this black art of communicating, but as people that have known each other a long time, as friends, that it gets easier and people know what you're saying, even if you're so we've been good. And Steve and I, as art directors, and for a long time we worked shoulder to shoulder in the in the art cave at Virgin. we had the advantage of being music fans. You know, it's crazy. Some designers working in music aren't really. You know, I was shocked to have to explain to somebody that I'd hired as a freelancer, like, no, you can't do that look for this band. Like, you can't make Smashing Pumpkins look techno. That's not what it sound like. It's wrong. Like, this look goes with this sound. That look goes with that sound. And of course, you don't want to be like stifled by that, but there are aesthetic ecosystems that sounds live within. And so, you know, for Julien-K, it was like, okay, how do we live within that so that people who aren't familiar feel like when they just see something at a glance, oh, this might be something that connects with me, and how do we keep expanding that so we're not just kind of samey as everybody else?
This is funny because there is the element of some of the things that, if you go back one, the plane, I've always been into, you know, like World War II planes and military stuff, and it's kind of interesting how we, you know, even then kind of had this touching of that, but all these other elements. I mean, this is a great cover, period. I mean, that's like that. I mean, we could still use that right now and it would be cool. You know, like, that's pretty awesome.
Well, you know, you're seeing some of the earliest things I played with is this kind of problem to solve. It's like, okay, you've got the name Julien-K, which is a name that not everybody's going to understand or get. It's not, you know, Rolling Stones or something. It's a unusual name. And so when you create a icon, a monogram that doesn't say Julien-K, that just says JK, or just as a thing, you know, that kind of all immediately complicates it in both kind of good and bad ways. It gives you another piece of graphic vocabulary, but you might be confusing people. So from day one, we sort of had to solve that. I always like that, you know, J and K are interesting letter forms, and they sort of feel like an Asian character. You know, it inspired some of these designs, and or like some, you know, Klingon sort of icon. So it's always been fun to play with J and K. But at the same time, we've always had to establish, no, the band's not JK, the band's Julien-K. And so
I know there was one thing from the beginning that I kind of pushed for, and that was that I did want something a little techie. I don't know if you remember that, but I definitely wanted the name to look a little technical, you know, maybe because I was into drum and bass and electronic stuff. There was definitely that aspect to it that I know that I personally wanted in that original logo. And I think, obviously, as you see, as these pictures are progressing, this logo here, go back one, Fu, was, as much as we loved it, it was not very readable.
And I still love it. I still love it. Yeah, it's so
I mean,
cool.
no one would ever know that says Julien-K. Like, it's very difficult to figure that.
But, you know, you're right, because, you know, you guys were presenting a little more like kind of long-haired rock and roll at that point. And obviously, you weren't sound, but you needed to communicate to me, to my team, like, okay, here's the personality we're trying to capture. Hearing the music made it clear.
And that kind of goes back to the story that we touched on here, is that, well, one, you are a musician, and you were in a post-punk band before we knew you back in the day. And you were in a band with a guy named Steve Gerdes.
Right.
And the funny thing was, and I've probably mentioned this before, but like I'm sure a lot of you don't know this, we never knew that those two pieces were connected. Like, when we were working with Tom, we'd actually worked with you for a while, I think. We never knew that you were in a band with Steve Gerdes, who is the guy who actually did all the Orgy logos and created all the, you know, the iconic Orgy stuff, but was also, funny enough, was there even when I was in Rough Cut doing our Rough Cut album. If you look on the back of the Rough Cut album, you'll see Steve Gerdes' name as the guy who did the layout on the record. So I've been connected to you and through this whole band, you know, brothers, since I was in Rough Cut, but didn't know that.
So you know,
somehow we found each other through these years.
Yeah, it makes it feel like it's a weird meant to be sort of thing. I don't know how, if I knew that Steve had done Orgy, because that was before he came to Virgin, and I started working with Steve at Virgin, and but we'd been a band together 10 years earlier than that, because I'm old. So Steve and I started a band in 1983, and
There's
so
the Dale's holding the Rough Cut thing up, Rough Cut album.
It's getting blurred, Dale.
Yeah, it's kind of blurry. I think because you have a filter on or something.
Yeah.
But
it
yeah,
was kind
go
of
ahead.
crazy. So Steve is the Orgy guy and had done Candy Ass and all this kind of fundamental brand establishment for Orgy, and I'm not sure I knew that. Like Steve, who's no longer with us, by the way. Steve has an incredible, vast portfolio of artists that he had worked with over the years. So me keeping track of everybody that Steve had worked with, by the time I started sitting in the same room with him in the 90s, I didn't know all the things.
But how crazy is that connection? I mean, it's so crazy, right? It's just like you said, meant to be.
And I vibe with you, and I vibe with Steve, because we're all into kind of the same things.
Hey Fu, let's pull up some of the like more finished Death to Analog stuff now.
Let me comment on a couple stuff in the chat. So everyone is really stoked on seeing all this. A lot of comments. People picking ones that they really like. A lot of people talking about they want to add to their tattoos, which is super cool. Inspiration going on, David. That's awesome. Thank you. Lot of questions about each image, which is actually awesome. So people are really like stoked on it, and definitely some comments on the strange coincidence and synchronicity involved in this, like
Synchronicity.
what looks like a 35-year relationship, which is crazy. So here we go. The cover that started it all, which was really an evolution. There's a lot of amazing shit going on here that I love. Every element that Tom added in here. I love basically Tom's handwriting, which has been a huge element in our branding, period. Go back to the image, please. And then we have one of the things I love about what Tom does is there's this masterful combination of fonts, of completely new and unique fonts and treatments of fonts, and it's just incredible. Death to Analog is done in a way that I've never even seen before, and on its own it could be a shirt. His handwriting has become iconic, and I mean we're using it all the way up to dark mode. I mean, what the fuck? I literally talked to Tom and said, hey, we have this idea for dark mode album, and I was kind of like showing him how we wanted to write it, and in the next minute he fired me off the dark mode logo, and I was like, yeah, that's it, thanks. I was like, wow. So it's just Tom. It's him. He knows how to finish the sentence, and then you've got the Julien-K logo in there. You've got some of our first kind of symbols, like the Death to Analog in a little, what do you call that, Tom?
Hexagon?
No, I know what that is, the shape is, but what are those called? Is that a mark? Is that like a...
Yeah, it's a little icon,
Yeah, okay, a little icon. Yeah, we've got our first iconography, or however you say that, going on, which are things that I love. It's very military, somewhat religious, just all these elements. And then we finally found the idea of having real photography, not something that was like, there was no Procreate back then, but not something that was kind of, drawn or something like that. Or we created an original image, and it turned out, I mean, I've never seen anything really like this. It's pretty incredible.
We went to this art show downtown, and we were going through.
This is a good story.
Yeah, going through all these different things, and we just came across this photographer who was shooting all these models, and he was splattering them with like hyper colored paints. And so none of the images he had done looked like this, but he did have some of the girls painted in black, I think.
Yeah.
And but he was using hyper colors. And we thought, well, I mean, we loved it, met the photographer, and then we just started brainstorming that, look, obviously we want it to look a bit darker. We want it to be a bit more industrial. So that's where the goggles came in. I mean, I'm still wearing goggles, that's part of my outfit now. it's just a thing, you know. And so you know, we just made it a bit darker, and then, you know, we were able to shoot ourselves as well. And he was using very high speed photography to do this, and to capture all the droplets and everything. And, you know, we're literally like spraying each other with these bottles full of red makeup to create this effect.
You don't
And
get too many chances to do this right either, you know.
No.
So
no, he only had one shot,
Yeah.
basically.
One shot.
And yeah, so all these pictures really created such a crazy vibe, you know, for the actual images of it. Go back to that picture that's more of a detail picture, Fu. Go back a little. Yeah, that one. So Tom gave us this picture because I'm sure he wanted to talk about the detail in the artwork and everything else. And you can see that there's a lot of little details in what the layering of what you're doing as far as what the final album cover became. And of course that logo, which we finally settled on, the initial logo was definitely a little you know, had a little Transformers kind of vibe to it or something, which oddly enough we ended up putting a song in the first Transformers movie. So, you know, there's a lot of things that just, there was a lot of synchronicity for sure happening. Well, it always happens with us, but obviously there was a lot just initially to create this first thing that we were going to do and launch as our new project, basically.
I mean, the cool thing about E. Leon's photography and that little detail is, like, you know, you guys, the bands like Depeche Mode or Julien-K, Underworld, what I love about those bands is like the textures that they create, right? Like Depeche Mode were always these like the sounds that they were sound inventors, you know, and you'd hear this kind of like texture going on in the layers of their sound that is what makes them interesting. It's not, for me, it's not their melodies or their messages, but Depeche Mode has, to this day, even their last record, very interesting texture and sound design. So that from that very first record, that little detail is showing, like, oh, there's the texture, a richness to texture that I hear in the music, and I've always wanted to capture in the visuals.
A lot of people are seeing the details now. Kathy just said she noticed in that analog in the hexagon is backwards or inverted, looking like you're in a mirror. And those are all the things that just give it this, it just makes it look weird and cool, you know, and special. And you don't necessarily notice that it's wrong, you know, but it's wrong in the right way.
Yeah, he always has these great.
Oh, we have it.
He always has these great little twists that are unexpected that you just go, oh, okay, yeah, that just took what we were thinking to like a whole new level.
Yes. Now, this is the stuff I was talking about.
Yeah.
Fu found it. So this is what I was talking about. You know, when we saw it used like this, oh my gosh, we were just like, this is it. You know, this works. This works everywhere. Yeah, this completely sold it for me. So cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
This was, to give some credit. The handwriting that is Death to Analog is actually Shoot, who worked with me, Polychrome.
Oh, okay.
And some of this stuff, a friend of mine named Nassim Higson, who's a very well-known art director now, works in Amsterdam. I gave him some stuff. He actually like put stuff on video and then re-photographed video screens in order to get some of these distortions going, which was super.
Wow. That's insane.
Like that's him photographing video screens to get that kind of light distortion.
Wow.
Very cool.
I didn't know that. That's incredible. Wild. Yeah, I mean, this stuff really, for me, just really made it all work. I really just understood that this was like a serious, you know, propaganda, you know, kind of vibe, and I just loved it. I mean, look at that.
When we re-release these, you know, albums, because at some point we're gonna run out of these Death to Analog, especially the, you know, vinyls and whatever. I want to kind of revisit some of this stuff and like, because there's so many like cool options as far as there's some other covers, there's so many cool things. I feel like if we, revisit the record, that maybe we should revisit some of these original art ideas and reutilize them, because
Yeah,
they're
this,
amazing.
this stuff I think you guys told me was too far out way back in the day, like
Yeah.
too abstract. But as a good art director once said to me, like you don't kind of like inch up on a good idea. You have to kind of go past it and then back up. So
The funny thing is that now that the brand's more established, all that stuff works really, really well because we can be more nebulous, we can be more mysterious, because it has been defined now. So this is from the initial first website, which I still think was one of the coolest websites, and I think that
I love the arrows.
yeah, it's so cool. I think that what we did, Tom, was we talked about making a website that just read like a book because at the time I was really websites weren't very sophisticated back then. They were very annoying, and I was thoroughly annoyed by websites, as I am by almost everything. And we made this website that was just super clean. It just turned. You just hit the arrow, and you went through this like full book, and it actually turned out really, really well. And that was our website for a very, very long time.
Did you write these song titles by hand, Tom?
that's Jonathan.
Jonathan.
This iconic kind of scratchy handwriting is Jonathan Shute, and he wrote he wrote the Death to Analog, and I still have it to this day. I made him write like a whole alphabet and several times. So
I think we have that. I'm gonna look for it now.
then
That's
we
awesome.
and maybe he wrote these out, but then we also had the alphabet so we could just start piecing together.
Yeah. Amazing.
But it's never been a font, like we can't type. It's all graphics that get pieced together.
Yeah.
So Tom, we have people that are that have literally have the website in a folder, like they screenshotted the whole thing, and we have people who said that they spent a lot of time on it as a kid looking at that website, and so I mean it really worked. It really achieved the goal. People really appreciated and were moved by the art direction and the story that it told.
We'll let us design every page, right? Let us design every page for it. And we all know, even today, most websites are just boring crap, and wanted to make something that was great.
I really wish that makes me wish we still had it up. It's pretty cool.
So Polychrome was an umbrella of people, around you as well. So like when he was talking about Jonathan and these different people, and what was the guy's name that worked on Dead by Sunrise?
Another Thomas.
Right.
Yeah.
So there was Polychrome was this umbrella, which I believe was you and your brother, or am I wrong?
It was the design studio, and at one point we had maybe 15 people working in LA, and
But was your brother involved in that or not?
Running an office in San Francisco, and so they had a smaller group because they were doing bigger projects with smaller groups, and we were kind of doing more projects with more people.
So so what's really cool is that obviously Tom is insanely talented and creative, but he had these other really creative people around him, his band in a sense, his bandmates, that could also, they bring in things, they all had their specialties or whatever, and this is part of it right here with this writing that was done by Jonathan, which is amazing.
Like you guys, I know I'm not an asshole because I'm still friends with almost that ever worked at the studio, so that's cool.
Look at these.
That's
these
awesome.
are interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. I love the smeared marks down below. I really like those. The one on the left is straight up usable right now. Really cool. Jeez. Keep going.
You guys
my gosh.
You guys are
Those
like
are new shirts right there. Oh my God.
That one on the bottom is awesome.
Oh my gosh. Those are amazing.
Yeah, I haven't even seen some of these in
Look at this. God, those are all excellent.
But we spent a few hours the other night. Fu and I went through probably 3 different areas of places where we could find anything from back in the day.
a lot of these Nassim Higson which again, I got lucky in a situation where I could hire some people or invite people to work with Polychrome that I was just fans of their work. So like you guys, if you're going out and bringing in a, guitar player or something, you go try to collaborate with somebody who you're a fan of their work. So
Yeah.
Seam was a great designer, still is. I think he might just be working for Nike in Amsterdam.
Wow.
Just
Really
the
good.
volume of work. It's like so much.
There's
much here.
tons for this first album for sure. Well, let's move on to some of the others now. Because I mean, there's like we talked about, we almost might have to make this a two-part thing because there's just so much.
Oh,
the
definitely.
work
Definitely.
is insane.
There's some of the initial book ideas and like, oh, it's so cool. Yeah, look at that. Jeez.
But like, that's kind of surfaced on the shirt you're wearing now, Ryan. Like, so some of,
This, before you move on, Fu, that bottom picture, I always loved that. I always wanted to
Me
make
too.
a poster or something out of that, or maybe, that became the new, when we redo the album, that I always love that as a possible cover as well. Such a cool version.
That's so cool. I mean, that is so many things. I mean, both those images could be amazing posters for, on tour and to people to sign, and that's amazing. Oh gosh, those are great. Oh wow.
There's just
It just doesn't
gallons
end.
and gallons of this stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's just so good. Yeah. So you guys can see what ends up happening when we finally really get a connection with someone that's amazing and starts really having a voice that really makes the music, have some sort of visual execution. It really, I mean, once you see these images, it just makes our first album come together. It makes me think of songs. I mean, this stuff all inspires me right now to this day. It's just so cool. Ellen says, talk about time capsule. Yeah, I know, right? And Ellen is in design and stuff too. So that's saying a lot.
David said, I lost it. Hold on one second. David said something really cool. He said the Zoom is like an orgy of amazing art and minds working together.
Yes.
Awesome.
I love so around California Noir era was when we were really trying to figure out, if this is going to be a band that's an actual business, I thought that we needed to be able to tour, for real, often and regularly, so that, the music could be created. We could go out and actually have a way to make actual money and actually gain new fans, because there isn't really a lot of outlets anymore to gain new fans and to keep perpetuating this. And we were doing a whole lot of talking about it, and I was very into branding everything. And Tom sent me this. It was so cool. I was like, yes, that's touring that. That's awesome. Oh, it's such a cool, and that just made California Noir come alive.
Let's talk about the logo.
Yes.
How this kind of came about.
Let's see if I can find some of the handwriting prototypes.
So
yeah,
when we started this California Noir concept that Ryan had come up with, I'm not sure what it was, but I know that I had found a t-shirt or something somewhere, and the way that this writing was on this t-shirt reminded me of what this flavor of this sound that we were doing with this new direction with California Noir. It had this sort of French Riviera 80s, I don't know what else I was thinking at the time, but I was like, Tom, we need to come up with a logo that's kind of like handwritten or something. And funny enough, I think you were really shooting for the neon logo like very early on, which we ended up using.
Yeah,
you see it right here.
I can't, I think you're triggering my memory. When you say French Riviera of 80s, I can remember thinking Roxy Music and Brian Ferry, and you guys were moving maybe musically in a little bit of that direction, like a little more lush. So it was like, okay, how do we do something like that, but not have it feel cheesy and lightweight? How do we keep it dark and yet have a kind of elegance that feels again like it fits with the music.
Mm-hmm. And I know that I drove you crazy because you wrote this logo probably, I don't know how many times.
Yeah, this kind of stuff is hard to do, right? Connected letters and with a word that people don't know. It's like, again, how do you keep that legible or sensible?
And I know we went back and forth a lot on that until finally there was one that was like, oh shit, that's it. Like it was, I don't know, there's something so cool about it.
And then that got turned into neon. We
Yeah.
used this as well. I mean,
Yeah.
we used this as is, and then we did a neon version of this.
Yep. We actually created a neon sign.
Yeah.
Which
Whichever
you have one, right, Tom? I think you have one. Yeah.
It's cool to have your handwriting in neon. But this, I've done handwritten stuff for other, the first logos ever were, of course, just people's signatures. 400 years ago, Cartier still exists sort of as a signature, and that was the author authorizing their work with their signature, like an artist signing a painting. So I liked that part of this to be like, okay, Julien-K's signature.
Keith has a question here.
One of the interesting, hitting on that, Tom, and I do see Keith's question as well. This definitely, the thought was, what could be written on, shirts. And we kind of had this whole idea, this very fashion, as we always have. We had this fashion like presentation and element. And yes, I have the neon on behind me up here in my box, you can see. And that was definitely something that kind of factored into this 80s approach to California noir. Definitely something I think we achieved, and that's when we started printing, the Julien-K on the inside of our shirts and stuff like that, which really made a cool, interesting detail in our merch. But to get to Keith's question here, let me get down here. Boy, everyone is really hitting on all the stuff right now. It's starting to draw the parallels between Indiegogo and all the stuff that we've done and these designs. Keith said, I'm interested in knowing the process of selecting the elements for a package when the artist doesn't know what they want. Are they riffed when listening to the music and reading the lyrics? And what are the first things you generally come up with? A logo, a picture, a sketch, etc.? These questions are selfish as fuck for my band, LOL. Yeah. And that's fine. I mean, that's why we're here. A lot of us are creatives, so no, it's totally cool.
It's I really just start playing around. It is a lot like doing music, right? Where you don't know whether it starts with a riff or it starts with a sound or it starts with a lyric. It could start in any of those places. What Amir and Ryan and Fu have always got, though, is again, something some corporations still don't get is a brand is not just one logo, especially today. It's how do we create a whole vocabulary, design vocabulary, and that we can keep evolving and keep using. So when I start designing something, I'm rarely trying to narrow it down. I'm trying to expand. And so it's like what elements trigger other elements? Where am I getting ingredients that I can keep morphing and keep growing and that are going to lead to other ingredients? So you guys have all seen that in the years going on, and I think that makes like Easter eggs for super fans. It's like, oh, that's an element that's reappearing from another kind of from an earlier version. And so I really kind of maybe start working with systems, and how to when the things start feeling like they're clicking with each other, and even things, or especially things that seem like they shouldn't work together, when they feel like they do, then you're like, okay, this tastes interesting, and you want to keep going, which very much like a song, right? You've got a certain sound that might be against another sound, but together, all of a sudden, something interesting is happening there. How do you keep going with that?
That's awesome.
Sometimes
Um,
you got sometimes you don't, sometimes you've got, I don't sketch too much anymore, except when I kind of sketch like an architect, like how is this going to work and what's the pieces that are kind of going to go in together. I'm faster just working on the computer now.
getting actually that leads right into this question from Dale. Tom, when creating a logo, are you just playing around in Photoshop or seeing something interesting and changing it up?
I will, I'll I'll start with letters. Most logos are letters, and I've always been a type designer and a real aficionado of letter forms. And so maybe I will sketch at that point. And again, for Julien-K has a weird set of letter forms, but it's great that there's a K on one end that can kind of balance the weird J on the other end. And so I'll sketch some of that, and then it's a lot of playing around. And as you see with this earlier stuff, a lot that gets discarded, a lot that you just got to create an incredible volume of stuff to start getting at what might be good. But nowadays, like with dark mode, that was like here done, because sometimes you do it fast and it's good.
I mean, look at
Just
that.
Keith, this is a great example. Like, so Ryan and Amir gave me this photo, and I was like, okay, this is a good photo, interesting photo. And I don't know, I'm not sure it was black and white, maybe it was color, but I was like, oh, this needs to be black and white. And the letter shapes, I think for this, they're broken and distorted and but if they're not big enough, you kind of don't get their detail is what's interesting. So we want to crank that up. We want to take this new JK mark and kind of roughen that up a little bit. And like you said, Ryan, it almost feels like a rune, or it's got some rough carved into stone feel, but at the same time, it's sci-fi as well.
Yeah. Still technical, but it has this feel that just definitely gets into that. Like if you found a spacecraft that had been floating there for 100,000 years or something, gives me those feels. It makes it kind of timeless, which I really, really appreciate. A couple more great comments in here as you're talking, Tom. People are really pinging off the things you're saying, and I think that we could do a 2.5 hour session with you, but we will break it up. Okay, let me see here. Oh, hold on. Every time that turns off, it
Sabrina was like, how long is this going to go? I was like, I don't know.
we try to keep it at an hour, but when it's good, it can kind of crank. I will end it soon. But there's some good questions, so I want to definitely get to them. And even more people are even coming in, which is fucking amazing. Let me see here. Something Kevin said, something he's discussed with Ryan, and this is all pinging off the things you said, so I just want to add them in. Something I've discussed with Ryan, one of the things that he really likes about the band is that nothing is really thrown out forever. We always incorporate it in a new way. And Kevin, that's really important because one of the things that we go for is you saw when we looked at the cover of Death to Analog. When I look at that cover, I see this complex, amazing, unified design. But when I look at it, I personally see a bunch of elements that to me are each individual things that could be like used as an item or make a shirt out of it, or maybe I could tattoo it on myself, or all these things that artists do and love. We want to put designs on things, and that's, I think, the mark of really, really good design is when you can take elements and you can repurpose it and put it on different bodies of work and tie everything together. That's what I think is so fantastic about this work and these fonts, this heavily font driven type of work, and the way the fonts are laid out it's just so well designed, and the spacing and everything is so cool. You can really kind of, smash them together with other things and make something special. And continue to use the work. And I
When
do see
we
your hand raised, Ishmael, Amir.
Yeah, when we started the whole harmonic disruptor idea, where we were sort of returning to what I consider like our roots, and that is that, yes, we are, an industrial kind of band. I mean, Orgy was industrial, but of course there were other elements, these new wave elements. I mean, all these elements still live in what we do, but the idea with Harmonic Disruptor was to go back to that and not be afraid to really revisit the 90s, kind of make it fresh again, but to go back to all of that stuff and really just embrace it for this album. And so the look of it as well, when we talked to Tom, and I think I can't remember what you would have heard at the point, you know, that we were working on some of this stuff, but I remember your first idea, you were very close with this sort of disrupted way of writing, not only the logo, but the album title and everything. And I loved it right away because it had this like Sex Pistols, Nevermind the Bollocks, where there's like, you know, newspaper clipping of all these different kinds of letters kind of just laid out, you know, like a ransom note, you know, an old-fashioned ransom note or something. And I loved that. But we took it another step forward because I was like, I love this, but I want it to be kind of harder and more, even more, you know, I don't know what, you know, if I'd said more industrial or more what it was, but, and then you came back with this. So that this was like, you know, it never usually ever takes more than that, except for the handwritten Julien-K. I know that one was a lot of tries. But that's sort of my recollection about how this whole thing came about. Of this, you know, we were definitely revisiting all that era of all the bands, and even the artwork I was kind of referring to as the way that sort of background that you created was so cool. I mean, the whole thing is cool. And even there's a little detail, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember there was something wrong with your computer or something, and when you were typing the credits for
It was like importing the file you were giving me, taking like maybe a Word file into TextEdit or something. It would just created these long strings of garbage, and
Yes.
we're like, okay, we're using that.
Yeah, and he was just like, yeah, we're gonna use this mistake. And at first I was kind of taken back by it, but then I was like, holy shit, this is so cool.
Yeah.
It just looks like the computer's malfunctioning.
Yeah. Which was
And
perfect.
Yeah.
But you use that in the music all the time, right? You overcook a distortion effect or something, and so like that's the same thing. I want that logo needs to feel like it's, you know, going through a pedal and getting
Yes.
like you'd do with a part of the song.
And you added that stuff too, which, you know, where it says like input and output and all this stuff. It's yeah, you really nailed it. I still like this. I want to use that.
Guys, so we have a hand raised and a couple comments here. Sasha says, I love the design so much I spell my name with the 5s now, which is that's so cool. I mean, that to me, that's probably one of the most powerful things. And someone said that it reminds them of a ransom note. And
Yeah.
that is, oh my God, like that's pretty powerful. Ishmael, my friend.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you, my brother?
Doing all right. I'm doing really great, honestly.
Awesome.
Wife got a promotion at the job, listen to my favorite band, talking to an awesome designer. Because I'm not sure if I mentioned it before, but I'm a graphic designer myself.
Yes. I was hoping that you'd chime in.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't really have much to say, but thank you for like inviting Thomas along, Tom today, because seeing the processes and everything he's done, like I love it. And like he's living my dream. Like honestly, I always wanted to be a designer in the music industry. But by the time I was graduating from college and everything, it's like, hey, it's iTunes and
Right.
art are being thrown away and all of that stuff. So fortunately still a designer, but just had to take a different career path. But this is super inspirational. Just want to say love everything you guys have been showing us, that this is, I don't know, a dream. Like this is one of the ways to cap off my weekend. So
That's
just
awesome.
say
Thank you.
thanks.
Well,
Dom, keep doing your thing, man.
thank you. I want to speak to that though, because you brought us something important, and that is, you know, how much things have changed in terms of the way this, you know, branding is used. And in my opinion, although it has changed in this modern age of digital and all this kind of stuff, I think that it's even more important to have, branding. Of course, the budgets have utterly been decimated for artists, and it's extremely hard to do this kind of stuff. And we're very lucky to have a relationship with Tom for so long. But you look at guys like the Annex, who he just ended up having to learn how to do it all himself, and all these other bands that really have a really great art direction, and they're keeping it very consistent, that really seem to get it. I think that they understand that in this modern age, it's still very important for us to have like this unified, very strong aesthetic and design sense that looks unified after album after album, because you are seeing now, we have to design for this. You are seeing like album covers are this little tiny square, right? Like, so we design completely differently now. It isn't like this, how cool and detailed you can make something. Is it going to look okay in a tiny square? So it's definitely a head change. It's definitely a head change, but we've certainly found it to be, really important to have these elements available to us. And, now we're using them in Instagram posts and Facebook, wallpapers, and all of us have to learn Photoshop, and, you have to learn how to do a lot of it yourself, or at least resize stuff and figure out every format that is out there now. And it changes constantly. And things like YouTube have completely obscure, weird requirements that have nothing to do with any of the others. And it's really annoying, but still very important to get everything to look the right way. And to have elements like this is extremely powerful. This is cool.
I love in this one that's up right now, I love the middle one in the second row, like, oh, that was somehow included. I mean,
hey, important too. Yeah, some font I didn't have. It's like reading a different language or something.
Yeah. That's so funny.
I want to say thank you. And, with this is like, another hour call, but I'm an accidental designer. I really, I was a punk rock person. I was always doing flyers, and I was an artist and had gone to art school, but not design school. I didn't know how to be a designer. But my bandmate, who we've mentioned a bunch of times, Steve Gertis, was like, you know how to run the computer, right? Could you come in? And they had just gotten a computer at the art department. This 1990 at Virgin Records. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, could you come in into the office and work for a bit? And I thought that was going to be kind of a 2-week gig, and I stayed there 10 years. So it was
that's insane.
It was crazy, but like it took me a little bit, and then I realized, wow, I've got this job that everybody in town wants to have. I should keep it. And it ended up, being fun. So
that's insane. Well, Tom, I know that, you've been very generous. Honestly, you're getting requested for a comeback, so we'll have to try to schedule another one. I knew we would have a lot to talk about, but I kind of feel like we could keep going, and it's been educational for me, and it's been fun. And I think we barely scratched the surface of all the content that we've created together. And we haven't even talked, guys, just so you know, Tom's Loft is where we filmed the Mannequin Eyes video as well. So, we have done, he's just been such an instrumental guy in our band, not just our band. We didn't even touch Dead by Sunrise. So we will get into that next, and our relationship with Chester and all that kind of fun stuff. And by the way, Tom, there's some really cool stuff coming up for Dead by Sunrise. We've kind of got the entire original team on board, from Warner Brothers to Talinda to me, Amir, and Fu, and we're going to be doing some stuff with some of the Dead by Sunrise material, so we might be able to go back in and kind of touch on some of that stuff, and that should be some exciting inside information for everyone here. Super good response, amazing attendance. Yep, there's that. But you know what, Fu, we'll save this stuff for later. That's Tom's Loft. That's where he is right now. It's just so cool. So this guy just oozes super fucking cool stuff, man. So Tom, thank you so much. I know everyone has a Sunday to get to. Amir is working with Marissa on a new video for Julien-K that we've been talking about. Can't wait to share that stuff with you. They've got a ton of cool content. I'm sure Tom's going to love seeing that too. A lot of new stuff in store, and thank you so much. Thank you, Tom, for many years.
Yeah, look, he's showing the.
Oh yeah,
you guys recognize that?
How cool is that place?
Only your buddy would allow you to come in and take over his loft to shoot a video with a couple of masked 6-foot models, right?
That was
Pretty
fun.
fun. Pretty fun.
A bunch of shoots here. This building gets used all the time. You see it. Just recognize those X's, and you'll see them in like commercials all over the place.
Well, guys, thank you so much for this time on Sunday. Thank you for everyone that came. This was a really big one. We really appreciate you guys. We appreciate you guys showing up every Sunday with us, and we will see you again next Sunday. And have a great week, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.